hiring and firing is probably the scariest part of my whole job. You know, they tell you the only system I've ever had as far as hiring and firing is make sure you have 3 months worth of that person's salary and savings. Because the idea is, if
kind
you
of just talking about this, a lot of the times when you bring someone on or you get someone to help with your systems, sometimes they're a little timid and they're a little unsure of what's acceptable at our business, the business.
Wow, amazing. Well, then let's just jump right in today with Work the System, chapters 1 through 4. Mr. Cook,
Yes.
since it is your book, we'll let you lead.
Absolutely. So we've got 30 minutes, so I'll go ahead and get started. So chapters 1 through 4. So really this is kind of taking us through, kind of getting us into what he calls the systems mindset, and then kind of talking about stepping back from your systems and really kind of taking really a bird's eye view, or like a systems manager approach. So really kind of getting into it in chapter 1, he really kind of talked about essentially, he kind of takes all the chaos in the world and kind of puts, a different spin on it. If you really think about it, everything in the world works 99%, 99.9% perfectly the way it's really designed and built from a system standpoint. Now, whether the system is operating the way you want it to, or it's yielding the results you want, is really a different question. In hearing that, how does that kind of change you guys' view on, I guess,
like you said, everybody assumes that we're in the middle of chaos. Mm-hmm. Like everything is so chaotic. Everything works exactly like you said, just boom, boom, boom. It's like, so that just gets your mind into thinking, all right, if I've got all this chaos and there's all this order in the world, all right, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Yeah, I can't just chalk it up to, oh yeah, the world's chaotic. We have to have systems. Right. And for me, this is kind of eye-opening because I've been building a lot more through KV Core, which is our CRM, building a lot more funnels and things like that they've been teaching us. And so I get a lead in, and all of a sudden it's in the machine and it starts going. All of a sudden I'm watching all these new people that I don't even have to call necessarily off the bat. You can see what they're looking at. You can see what they're interacting with, all this stuff. And so it's like, if you take time to actually build the system or tweak the system or whatever, as opposed to just saying, oh, just real estate, we're just going to run around there like chickens with their heads cut off, and that's how we're going to make it. So that was a really cool part of that chapter for me.
Absolutely. Alicia, Laura, thoughts?
So for me, I thought it was kind of cool how he starts dissecting Woodstock and talks about how some of the systems work, some of the systems don't work, and how when your systems are working, some of them on the front end, like day one, it was sunny, the musicians were all there, the systems that were working were in place. But if there would have been a day 4, it would have been total mayhem. And I think that really, this book, I think, is going to be really good to start the year off with, because the end of 2022, my team and I and my agents that I coach, we spent the entire month of December putting systems in place. We wrote our business plan. If they did what they were supposed to do, they wrote their 135s, or at least kind of started it. And as I was working through my 135 and getting all of my jobs down, everything that the company has to do is now on paper, and we're starting to farm those jobs out. It was super eye-opening that the only reason I haven't broke through the $250,000 ceiling in my business is because my systems are all broken. The only system that was correct in my business was customer service. That was it. That was literally the only thing that was correct. Probably the most important system to keep my doors open, because it got us lots of referrals, and the beauty of real estate is, referrals and closings equal a pretty decent salary. I don't ever want to do customer service again. I now want to be the keeper of all of my systems.
Right.
How did you discover that only one system was working properly?
By writing my 135, by figuring out what actually had to be done to make my goals really happen. I was consistently not getting to my calls. To Steve's point, when new leads came in, nothing or no one was touching them. We now have a smart campaign where there's an immediate text message that goes out to them. Once that text message goes out, if they respond, I get the response in KV Core. So, to Steve's point, I'm a one-man show right now. It would be better if as soon as it came in, someone called, but until I have an ISA that can call the moment it comes in, my text message takes that place. And if they respond to the text message, I immediately can respond to them. I probably have anywhere from 20 to 35 hot leads for January that all are expecting a call from me over the next probably 14 days. And I know my systems now tell me when to call them. I don't have to remember. I mean, that was a system to know who to call and when to call is probably the most important thing you can do as a realtor, because you try to keep it all up here and you're like, oh shit, I need to call that person, or oh shit, I need to call that person, and you forget. And so it was watching the holes in my bucket. And I think the biggest eye opener was when I started my funnel campaigns, bringing in all these leads, and then summer happened and I wasn't making my daily calls like I should have. And then August happened. And within the first week of August, I could physically calculate over $7 million worth of business I had lost because I didn't work my systems in the summer. I didn't do my phone calls. That was gut wrenching. $7 million worth of business lost would have doubled my income from last year and we would have hit the $500,000 GCI this year if I wouldn't have let my systems go by the wayside.
Right.
That's a really expensive mistake. Really.
So
Right.
in terms of the book, and so I'm doing the audiobook, and this one for me, it being read to me is not clicking as well as the last two. So I don't know if it's a me problem, or if I should get a paper copy and follow along. The first couple of chapters are setting up the idea of systems.
Mhm.
All right. So welcome to our book club today. We are meeting on Thursday as opposed to Tuesday this week, just because we had another class we were taking Tuesday this week, and we will be going over the book, Work the System, 4th edition, chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. Take it away, Mr. David.
Absolutely. So these chapters start to get a little technical. They kind of go into some documents, what they are, what they're kind of used for. So I think for these chapters, I'll kind of go through, so he kind of talks about, action being a builder of confidence. Inaction really is the cause of fear. And so, I mean, this kind of goes back to, some of the books we were reading earlier, especially like Atomic Habits, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And, I think that's something we all already know pretty well. Now, what he does get into is, 3 documents that really kind of help set the tone for your systems in your business. Kind of starting off with that strategic objective, which is really just a short document kind of outlining the philosophy and the company, and then, getting into the general operating procedures and principles, which honestly, once you start getting into this, and the working principles, I think the reason this works is, you and I were kind of just talking about this. A lot of the times when you bring someone on or you get someone to help with your systems, sometimes they're a little timid and they're a little unsure of what's acceptable at our business, the business that you're working at, and how do you go about things. Well, I think these documents are really kind of, a way of really nipping that in the bud. And it's like, okay, sure, I get that there's some uncomfortability in here, but at a bare minimum, let's take a look at these general operating principles. And these are things you keep in mind when you make daily decisions in this business, which to me, I feel like almost kind of takes some of that timidity, I don't know if that's a word, out, So kind of going through these 3 documents, like how do you kind of see these, utilized in your business? And then, what pitfalls are you running into now that you think this could kind of, essentially, get rid of some of those inefficiencies so that you don't see them anymore?
Well, for me, so like as I was reading this or listening to it be read, I think as business owners, we focus so much on the front end of building and creating a business. We focus on 2 things. We focus on, what's our big why? What's our value proposition? Like, why are we doing this? And why should a customer or a client or another human use our services or our practices? And then we just get busy, right? And then you find yourself, and as I say this all the time as I'm coaching agents, we find ourselves being reactive, like he said in the book, putting out fires, because we don't stop on the front end to create what these systems should look like. If you have a strategic objective, then no one in your business has any question as to the purpose of the business and how you're going to get there and why you're going to get there, right? And so that's different than your value proposition. Your value proposition is how do you bring value to that client or consumer that's using you, whereas your strategic objective kind of overlays the business idea and how it's going to come down. And I think that, the biggest thing that it eliminates is extra unneeded hours in your day. When you have, and he kind of touches on this maybe in chapter 5, it's either 5 or 6 that he starts talking on how, he has that epiphany in bed and he's like, okay, well, Centratel is going to die. I've got to do something. So what am I going to do? And he starts realizing that his entire, first 5, 6, 7 years, however long he was in business, was just based on putting out those fires and being reactive. When you have these 3 documents in place, you are being proactive, which then allows you to gain those hours back, because when you're proactive and there's a system in place and you hand that system to someone, if they don't follow it, they're fired. And there's a clear line as to where being fired comes in, right? And so the idea behind all of these, and what I love about all of these, is when you're an entrepreneur or you're someone who has big dreams and goals, your goals and dreams normally don't stop with your business. And he talks about doing this, the strategic objective, the general operating guidelines, and then the working procedures. He talks about doing that in your life and in your business. And I think that I think people that perfect these are the ones that have their business up here that supports their lifestyle, their whatever, but then they go on to do other bigger, greater things, because once they get this in a nice, neat little package and it's ticking on its own, well, you become bored. And so that allows you these 3 steps allow you to have the bandwidth to move into another realm of your life, whether it be, another side hustle in your business, or volunteering somewhere and being, effective in that, or is it traveling? Is it, but it allows space and time for more than one thing. And I think as Americans and as humans, probably just total, we get so bogged down. And then you turn around and you look at your day and you're like, shit, I worked, or shit, I dealt with kids. But there's not, you look backwards and you're like, I didn't really get anything done. These, I think, create a guideline and a roadmap as to what each moment in your day should look like,
right? Which
then brings you to time blocking, right? Because if you have these systems in place, then you can time block and you know exactly how long it should take you to make buyer calls, seller calls, whatever it looks like. So to me, this gives you back time.
Exactly. And so actually kind of transitioning into chapter 6, where he kind of talks about, essentially kind of managing the systems, and optimizing the systems, that in itself is a whole nother system, and so he actually kind of talks about it. So when he says, kind of taking the most flawed systems first and then moving to the next. So I'm kind of curious to hear, maybe if you had a different thought, but what that says to me, just in my experience, actually kind of, I've helped other companies improve their systems. And so in going through that, the question becomes, well, what's a flawed system and what's most flawed? And so
we are going over Work the System, the 4th edition. And today we are going to be going over, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it 12, 13, 14, and 15?
That's what I have.
That's what I read. So we're all on the same page then. Awesome.
So chapter 12, good enough. How is this chapter after all of the technicality from the last couple of chapters? What was you guys' thoughts?
To me, now I'm starting to like the book. I think it was a little too. Now, and I don't know if it's just because I'm listening to it, so I'm not really getting like the nuts and bolts of it listening to it. And God bless this guy. I can't, the voice is, it's easy for me to stray. So I have to speed him up. And if I speed him up, I can hear him. So like I'm listening to like 1.8 right now. I'm flying through these chapters and he's keeping my attention now. It's like, I got this. All right. But all of a sudden, I think now we're starting to get into some, all right, you build the machine. Great. Wonderful. But now we're starting to get into like all right, now we'll get into some tactics and get into some meat and potatoes. And so this is kind of, to me, now that we're in part 3 of the book, I'm kind of digging it a little bit more. And I love it. And I love this chapter. Good enough. It's always, that needs to be all of our mantras. We can't be perfect. Just ship it. We got to get it out.
Yeah. So I think Alicia and I actually kind of ran into this week. Steve, I don't know if you know, but Lisa quit on me. So Alicia has kind of come in and taken a good portion of what Lisa and I were teaming up to do together. So we're together a lot more often, and we've been recording social media. And as a coach to agents, right? Like I tell them all the time, just get started. I don't care if you don't know the script perfect. I don't care if you don't know the area perfect. Just get started, right? And I think anybody in business tends to want to have, I hear this all the time. I want all my ducks in a row before I get started. Well, you're never going to fucking get started. And so yesterday, Alicia came in the office and she was like doing a little jig, and she was so proud of herself because she posted a TikTok, a reel, and we were like celebrating. And then her next response was, well, then Joel pointed out I misspelled a word. I was like, I don't care. Like, you did it, right? You just got started, and that is now going to be evergreen content. And idiots like me that can't spell are going to love Alicia because she just got started, right? It'll create a connection. And as I was reading this, it was like, oh my God, I want to record this whole chapter and just share it with anybody that tells me they have to get all their ducks in a row before they can get started. Because I think that so many people don't get started or get held back, at level one and never get to the next levels and never reach their full potential because they have some definition of perfection in their brain. Nothing's perfect ever.
Right.
I mean, ever, So I was like, I was not listening in super psycho speed. I was listening in regular speed because I didn't want to miss anything. Like, it was a fabulous chapter, and it was such a good eye-opening conversation for so many agents that, that we work with, and our buyers and sellers, right? I hear all the time, oh, I just want to get all my ducks in a row. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's like, well, yeah, but if you don't just get started, you're never going to buy. If we don't just get out in the market and start looking at houses, guess what? In 6 months, they're going to be more expensive, and you're going to be in a worse position than you are now.
Right.
So it gave me a lot of ammunition for clients and for coaching. I loved it.
Right. Lisa?
Yeah, I liked it. I'm one of those people who was like, I don't want to do anything until I feel like I know something. So it was it was annoying for me, but it was good to hear. I'm glad to hear you guys reaffirm that. I think that's my new motto right now is like, just post, just do it. Just whatever, just do it.
Nike.
Right. Yeah. So honestly, I really like the shooting for 98%, like almost kind of redefining perfection. Like everyone wants this 100% perfection. It's like, okay, well, honestly, if you're really looking at it from a corporate standpoint, 98% is perfect. Well, you don't need anything more than that.
In the real estate world, if you get 98% of your list price, it's considered full list price. That's just like when you take classes and stuff, they'll tell you that your goal is to be selling at 98% or higher because that's considered a perfect list price. Everybody's going to want to try to negotiate some. So most sales are going to have something off the list price or something, And so when you take classes, they tell you 98% is considered a perfect list price.
And I remember one in our Monday masterminds, I think it was Mark Z from Detroit, something he said always stick with me. He's like, play the 90s. And by that he means do something that is like 90% to 95% to like in that 90% likely to work. Everybody's going to say, well, but what if this? But what if that? Or what? There's always going to be a what if. But if it works 95% of the time, 96%, do it. And you will have a monster business if you just play the 90s,
Right. And so actually, I really like that he put this chapter right after kind of talking through all the documentation you have to have in your business, because, sometimes we get caught up in those details, and some of those details are just useless. It's like, that's when you come back to the, look, 98% perfection, let's move on and let's get to the rest of these processes. You're going to have a lot of them to go through. So going into chapter 13, errors of omissions, he kind of talks about inaction here, like errors of omission, but he calls it, and he kind of compares it to procrastination.
All right. So today we'll be going over chapters 16, 17, 18, and 19 for Work the System. And David, you are our spokesperson, so take it away.
Awesome. So, quick summary, chapter 16, this is extraordinary systems. Chapter 17, this is consistency. Chapter 18 is all about communication. And chapter 19, we talk about the biological prime time versus mechanical prime time. So if you didn't do your reading, you'll be very excited about this chapter. So, extraordinary systems. So, this is kind of where he talks about, how to really attract and keep people due to just your systems. So that's kind of having like a great recruitment system. So, when you listen to him, he actually goes through a handful of questions he and his team will kind of go through in their head, or actually, I think they may have it written out on paper. And so he's got a few of them. I don't know that I would implement all of them into my business, but for instance, did the applicant show up on time? He does an aptitude test, did they meet that minimum score? Why did they apply for the position? Or are they applying for any position? Did the applicant smile? Did the applicant listen to you and understand? And so it's a lot of these really good questions that, when you go to interview people, I don't know how much interviewing you guys have done. I know, Laura, you've done some, but it's just like sometimes you get into the interview, and I know for me, like the excitement will kind of take off sometimes. You get to talking to somebody that actually can hold a conversation, and you really start to forget, like, okay, well, what were we even here for? But he has a system for that. So kind of reading through that, any kind, and actually hearing that, any kind of thoughts that you have on that, does it kind of make it kind of paint a clearer picture for, once you come down the line to that for your business, or as you start to continue to do that into your business, do you see yourself adding some of those questions and some of those nuances as you bring in new people?
So I do, and hiring and firing is probably the scariest part of my whole job. They tell you the only system I've ever had as far as hiring and firing is make sure you have 3 months worth of that person's salary and savings. Because the idea is if you give them the proper 30, 60, 90 and 90 days, they should be making money. But I did find it interesting, because I did read that chapter. I did find it interesting that he spent a lot more time focusing on the system for the hiring, and then making sure there was a good system once the hire was in their position.
Right.
And focusing a lot more on who they were as opposed to what skills they had. Not that he pushed the skills to the side, but it was almost like if you've got the right systems and the right people, the right training will make it work. And that's, I think, more, when we were hiring for Christian, that was more of what, Louis and I talked about on the back end, was like, listen, we understand he's going to have a learning curve because his skill level was lower, right? He didn't know exactly how to do the job, but we were looking for someone who would fit into our system and where we are as a business. And that, when we hired our first virtual assistant for social media, she freaked out when it was like, oh my God, I expect you to kick it up a notch and just step in and do what you're supposed to do without a lot of guidance. Whereas Christian is like, okay, he never tells me no, he just jumps in and tries to do it. And so I think that I'm excited that that's kind of our process for hiring. Although now, after reading this chapter, I realized that I was definitely missing some steps. Like my grandma once interviewed for a job as a housekeeper, and the owner of the house laid a broom down in the walkway as if it had fallen. And she was the only person that didn't step over it, that picked it up, and she ended up getting the job. But I feel like a lot of did they smile? A lot of his questions are kind of like a test like that. Like, do they actually go the extra mile as far as, as opposed to, do they have the skill set?
Right. Alicia, anything to add?
So I like that chapter a lot. It sounds like a place I would actually like to work. I have left a lot of jobs because I crave that structure. I'm someone who can come in and get it done. I just need consistency from leadership and the tools to do it. And so I enjoyed it. That's how I perceive things as a consumer as well. I can't stand when I have to be passed off from one agent to another because they didn't give that first person the resources or the confidence to solve a problem at the first interaction. So I love that he talks about how terrible his phone answering service was, and then talks about starting to understand as a consumer what that's like. So I really enjoyed that chapter. I don't hope to do a lot of hiring and firing. I don't know that I want to be one of those large agent teams, but I definitely see it in the office already, just in terms of we need more like-minded people, and we need to figure out what that structure looks like to get them attracted to us so that we can. And he said, you know, if you, was it this chapter? I think it was chapter 16, he says, and I liked the imagery of, if you're going to do it, if you're going to implement any of this, it has to be all ships are full steam ahead. And so like that was something, I don't know, was I complaining yesterday, Laura? It was something I noted to Laura yesterday, is like we are physically being hindered by the other people not being full steam ahead with us. Mm-hmm. I like that. I hope we can figure out a productive way to bring like-minded people to us.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. Today we are doing Work the System, or we're going over chapters, was it 19 and 20 or 21, 20 and 21?
20 and 21. It was a pretty quick read.
20 and 21. It was definitely a pretty quick read, although this person had to catch up from last week, so it wasn't quite so quick.
That's okay.
Awesome. The floor is yours, my friend.
Awesome. Well, jumping in. So chapter 20, The Circles of Pakistan. What is the author trying to communicate with this example? Does anybody want to kind of take a stab?
Well, I think it's communicating that whether you have chaos or whether you have organization, that a system will run itself, and that it's up to you if you want to put organization over the system and make it run like clockwork, or you can just be the car dude who jumps out in the middle of the circle and gets under your car and starts doing the repair. Totally up to you. But that's what I got out of it.
Right. Anything to add, Alicia, Steve?
I heard there are rules to either a Western circle or the Eastern style circle. They each have rules, even though they are complete opposites. And so I think his point was, it doesn't matter what method you choose, as long as you understand and like announce the rules, it will function in the same way, just differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of had me like, just the thought of that, like driving through Manhattan or something, the traffic circles of Pakistan. It was like the way he described it. And this book has gotten me thinking now, all right, about everything needs to be systemized, like everything, like even if it's a system that's this small. Like, for example, I've got when I get an internet lead that comes in, it automatically gets put onto a search and then a follow-up plan. But if they don't have a phone number, I don't have something built to where it just takes all the tasks out that say call somebody. And so every time I have to go in and just delete all the phone calls I'm getting ready to do, and I'm like, no, screw that. It'll take me 5 minutes to fix this right now, and then I won't ever have to do that again. I'll just go boop, boop, and it's done. So even that small thing that would save me 5 to 10 minutes a couple times a day, every day of the week, that adds up to like 45 minutes to an hour. You know, so just thinking like that is like, what can we systematize as opposed to the giant circles of doom?
Right. Yeah, so I kind of took it as, you know, just to kind of add on to what you guys are saying, is really, you know, there's really no difference in, you know, how formal the system is, or even if you have a free-for-all system, it still kind of goes back through, like he was saying, the system's going to work 99.9% of the time. And then also, it's really kind of, so it's funny the way that he kind of describes the Pakistan circle, and as chaotic as the system is, it works in their environment. Because, you know, he even talks about, you know, everybody's honking, everybody's really cursing and getting mad, but they're almost kind of playing it as a game. It's like, here we take it personally, we get out, you know, pull a gun, whatever. But over there, it's just normal. It's just their environment. And that's how their system works. And there's really no sense in rehauling it. It's not like the system needs to be structured and formal like it does here in the West, because it works for them. They have their implied rules. They go as fast as possible. And honestly, they probably get there faster than we do.
Right.
But yeah, so I think this one, I mean, it was a relatively quick chapter, but I think it really kind of, you know, breaks down, you know, regardless of how the system is running, it's going to provide that result 99.9% of the time. And if you're considering all of your factors involved, you're going to have a system. You're going to have an operating system that's going to work right every time.
For me, it was kind of an example of how a haphazard system will continue to function until it doesn't. Because while those roundabouts may work in Pakistan that way, when he talks about, okay, somebody getting in an accident or having a car broken down, all of a sudden that system that's haphazard, I think, has holes, and they become very relevant. And so to me, it was a good eye opener that while yes, what I've been doing will lead me to a nice financial outcome, that if I want to make it better or be able to dictate what that outcome is, the systems have to be much more tightened. Because if something was to happen in that circle of doom, then, you know, all of a sudden traffic's going to back up. And if the rule is don't move your car over, which it doesn't sound like it is, where it is here, then that impedes everything.